Ta'ala says in the Holy Quran that permission to fight back is hereby granted to those who are being fought, for they have been wronged, and Allah is truly most capable of helping them prevail. Now that we are in the month of Muharram, Muslims and the followers of the Ahlul Bayt are beginning to commemorate the tragic events of Karbala, when more than 1,300 years ago, Imam Hussein alayhi salam, his family and his companions were martyred on the plains of Karbala by the army of Yazid. Imam Hussein alayhi salam, his companions and his family stood up for haqq, stood up for the truth, whilst the army of Yazid represented everything which was disgusting and evil and which is condemned in Islam. What is less understood and appreciated, however, when we talk about the Battle of Karbala and the lessons which we can take from the month of Muharram and from the message of Ashura, are the striking parallels between what happened in that holy month on that holy land and the present day plight of the Palestinian people, especially in Gaza. For Muslims, it should be a very easy connection for us to be able to see the striking parallels between these two events. After all, the Palestinians in Gaza were besieged and have been besieged for decades now by the Zionist invaders, and this has carried on until this very day. These evil Zionists, which can be compared to the Yazid of today, have the backing of the Americans and most of the Western world to commit any of the atrocities that they feel is necessary to inflict on the innocent civilians in Gaza. Today what I will talk about is the tragedy of Karbala itself, which cannot be compared to any other tragedy. But what we will do is we will see the lessons. We will see the lessons between the tragedy of Karbala and how we can make a difference in the world today, especially in relation to the Palestinians. There are two main reasons why we as Muslims are required and are obligated to care and focus on Palestine. The first is in the Islamic context, and it is in relation to the importance of this holy land in which Gaza is situated in. Palestine has a special status amongst the Muslims due to different reasons. As I mentioned, the first reason is because of the Islamic context. Masjid al-Aqsa, for example, is located here in this land, and Rasulullah himself chose al-Aqsa Mosque as the first qibla for the Muslims. As well as this, we have many ahadith from the Holy Prophet and from Amir al-Mu'mineen which talk about the merits of this land. Palestine is often mentioned in the Holy Quran as Ard al-Muqaddasa, which means the Holy Land, or Ard al-Mubarakah, which means the Blessed Land. And this land, Palestine, was the place of the prophethood and of many of the other different prophets as well, and is also the burial place of many of these prophets too. Palestine was also the land in which Rasulullah ascended upwards. This is the significance of Palestine in the Islamic context. But Palestine is also important to us because of the oppression which takes place there as well. As you've seen over the last 9 months since last October, the Palestinian people were shot, were bombed, were beaten, were arrested, tortured and humiliated. It doesn't matter whether it was men, whether it was children, whether it was women, whether people were old, whether they were young, whether they were able-bodied people or whether they were disabled people. It doesn't matter whether they were in schools or whether they were in hospitals. They were bombed and they were targeted on purpose wherever they were. This war machine, this Zionist war machine, slaughtered them in every single place and in every horrifying way imaginable. And how accustomed did we become every single year, especially during the month of Ramadan, in Shahr Ramadan, for years on end when we would see these babies being massacred, and it continues until this very day. The stated goal of these evil Zionists to follow the methodology of Yazid, and this is important to emphasize, the Zionists in Israel learned how to attack and how to slaughter innocent people from Yazid. And there is a very close similarity in their mindset and in how they target people. The stated goal of them, as you can hear from their government ministers, is to eradicate the Palestinians and to eradicate the Muslims. This is why they don't just target Palestine, they target the other Muslim countries which surround it, such as Syria, such as Lebanon, such as Iraq, such as Yemen. And of course, when they make these statements, especially in regards to the Palestinians, and when they carry out these actions, we as followers of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam will never stand for this. We as followers of the Ahlul Bayt, we as slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as Muslims, but more importantly as human beings with morals and a moral compass, will never accept this and will never allow this to happen. And this then brings us on to what our duties are. The lecture today I have titled Injustice from Karbala to Gaza. And some people will come and some people will say, hold on, don't make this an issue, don't speak about this. Do not compare the tragedy of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam to what happens these days. Someone who says something like this, although well-intentioned in some ways, is ignorant. These people have learned nothing. The tragedies that befell the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam existed for many different reasons. But one of these reasons is that so we could take examples on how they dealt with them and to see how we should then react in our day-to-day lives 1,300 years later. It is true, and I agree with all my heart, for the statement that there is no day like yours, Ya Aba Abdullah. This is the absolute truth of the matter. Nothing in this world can ever compare to the tragedy of what Al-Hussein alayhi salam faced on the land of Karbala. Nothing can compare to the beheading of the grandson of Rasulullah. Nothing in this world can be compared to this tragedy. However, when we see what was done to Al-Hussein, and when we see what was done to other members of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, we must understand that these people were our role models, and we must learn how to react to oppression from them. For example, when Abu Bakr stole the land of Fadak from Sayyidah Fatima, she said in a message to him, Fadak belongs to me. This is something I have been given by Rasulullah himself. And Amir al-Mu'mineen testified to this and agreed with this statement that Fadak belongs to Fatima. Abu Bakr, however, said to her, no, Fadak belongs in the hands of the Muslims. What did Fatima do after this? Fatima went to the masjid and she delivered an excellent speech in the face of these oppressors and of those who supported the oppressors. And she proved that Fadak belonged to her. But did anyone from that ummah listen to her? Who stood up for her from amongst the Muslims? A handful of people, including the members of her family. Nobody apart from that listened to her. Nobody bothered to go and defend the right of Sayyidah Fatima. Today, everyone understands that the land of Palestine belongs to the Palestinians. The land of Gaza belongs to the Palestinians. Will we then stay quiet when someone usurps this land, just the same way as they did with the land of Sayyidah Fatima? Will we also stay quiet when people's land, when people's rights are snatched away from them? Or will we take a stand the same way as the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam took stands in the face of oppression like this? And when we look at the tragedy of Ashura, we ask ourselves, how could nobody from the Ummah, how could nobody from the army of Yazid go to Imam Hussein alayhi salam and stand with him? Was it not clear that this man was going to be beheaded? Was it not clear that this man was enduring horrible oppression at the hands of Yazid's forces? Why did nobody go and aid Imam Hussein? Why was it that the call, is there nobody there to help me? Why did that have to be shouted by Imam Hussein? And why did no one react to it? How could they witness this and stay quiet? As in Karbala and now in Gaza, the oppressed Muslim people have been abandoned by the rest of the Ummah. Today, many of the so-called Muslims And I very heavily reiterate so-called, because how can someone be a Muslim and stay quiet in the face of this? How have these Muslims reacted? The same way they did when Yazid attacked al-Hussein, the same way when Abu Bakr usurped the land from Sayyidah Fatima, with silence. Therefore, many of these Muslims today would be on the opposing side of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Whether or not they say that they are followers of al-Hussein, their actions speak differently. Their actions show that they would be on the side of Yazid because of their silence on the tragedies which afflict the Muslims. The very concept of Imam Hussein's sacrifice is about resistance to oppression, resistance to tyranny, resistance to evil. Don't we shout this every year during the month of Muharram? Why is it then that we ignore this? Why is it that Rasulullah says that the one who goes to sleep at night and does not concern himself with the affairs of the Ummah and of the Muslims who are suffering, why does he say that these people who don't care about this and sleep happily at night knowing this is happening are not from the Muslims? Why is it that Imam al-Sadiq says that not helping these oppressed people is one of the greater sins? Not a minor sin, one of the greater sins which you will be forced to answer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to on the Day of Judgment. Do we want to be from this camp of non-Muslims, these non-believers, because we are too scared and too cowardly to even raise one word or one dua or one action in defense of the people in Palestine? Are you too scared that all of the pleasures in this world that we live in today are going to be taken away from you? If so, and you are genuinely scared of this, and you are scared of this dunya, and you're not fearful of the akhirah and your actions, then you have fallen into this trap. You have fallen into one of the greater sins which Rasulullah would condemn you for, and which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will hold you accountable for. The Holy Quran talks about the severe punishment of the oppressors. When Allah says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and as for those towns, we destroyed them when they acted unjustly, and we appointed a time for their destruction. What does Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam say? He says that when you see injustice, you must remedy it with justice. What does this mean? It means that when there is an injustice taking place in front of you, you don't sit quietly by and watch. You don't let it unfold in front of you without taking action. No, the contrary. You take the action and you replace it with a just system. You replace it in whatever way you can with truth and with fairness. You do not sit back and watch a war machine kill innocent children and women in front of you. You do not stand by idly whilst ethnic cleansing of Muslim people, of human beings takes place in front of you. You stand against it and you remedy it with righteousness, just like Hur did. And I will talk more about Hur later on. But this is the prime example of remedying injustice with justice. If a Muslim sees a dhalim, if a Muslim sees an oppressor trying to oppress someone and he is in a position to prevent this from happening, then it is wajib and obligatory on him to do so. Rasulullah says, help your Muslim brother, whether he is an oppressor or whether he is an oppressed one. It's an interesting statement. What does this mean? Someone went and asked him, Ya Rasulullah, what does it mean when you say, help the oppressor? We understand that we should help the oppressed one, but what about the one who is doing the oppression? How can we help him? Rasulullah says, if you are in the position to, take his hand so that he cannot do any more oppression. Therefore, if we see our own Muslim brothers being quiet on this matter, it is our duty to go and tell them to speak up. This is not a case of personal belief. This is a case of us following Islam, the collective religion of Islam, where we are told that as a community, we need to enjoin the good and forbid the evil. Lastly, I want to finish by speaking about the words of the ulama on how we should support Palestine and our duties, and why this is required. Ayatollah al-Udma Sayyid al-Sistani says that the entire world is called upon to stand up to this terrible brutality and to prevent the occupation forces, the Zionists, from continuing to implement their plans, which will cause further harm to the oppressed Palestinian people. If you're a muqallid of Sayyid al-Sistani, you have to go and stand up and do something. This is what he says. Don't argue with me, go and argue with Sayyid Sistani if this is your problem. Imam Khamenei says that every single Muslim in this world has a duty to defend the Palestinian people. Ayatollah al-Ulama, Sayyid Muhammad Taqi al-Mudarrisi says that what is happening in these stolen lands reveals day after day the evil of this Western world. And it shows their inability to deal with crisis and its ability to create them. It's not just the Zionists that we need to stand up and speak against, it is this Western system as well. These are the instructions and the insights of the representatives of Imam al-Mahdi. Therefore, we need to pay attention to them and not ignore them. And as Shahid Mutahhari says, if Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam was alive today, then his slogan would be Palestine. Why? Because Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam was the one who taught us how to stand up against the system of oppression that Yazid was in charge of. Therefore, it's important for Muslims to make this connection and understand the lessons of history. Otherwise, we will continue to repeat them. And these scenes in Gaza will continue until the end days. The one line I want people to take away from this is that Ashura is not just an event to be mourned. Ashura is an event for people to learn from. Don't come and mourn for Abu Abdullah whilst turning a blind eye to the same type of oppression he had to endure. Because if we do this, then we are doing an injustice to Abu Abdullah. And it is important that if we cannot take action, we at least make dua. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep the innocent Palestinians and Muslims safe from evil. We ask Allah to grant victory to the Muslims over their oppressors. And we ask Allah to have mercy over the deceased and over the shuhada. On the 9th night of Muharram, Yazid's commanders decided that it was time to fight Imam al-Hussein and his men. And they blew the trumpets in order to start the battle. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam was not ready to fight, so he called on his brother Abu Fadl Abbas. He says, Abbas, go to the commanders of Yazid's army and ask them to give us one more night. We will be ready tomorrow. Abbas went with Hussein's request, and it was granted. Why did Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam ask for one more night? Did he ask to pray? Did he ask for one more night to spend time with his children? Did he ask for one more day so that he could spend time with his beloved daughter? No. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam was waiting for a very special and very important guest to come and join him. This person was Hur. Hur was one of the captains of Yazid's army. He was the very captain who in fact stopped Imam al-Hussein from going to Kufa. And he, along with 1,000 of his men, forced Imam al-Hussein to come to Karbala, forced him to come to the land where he would shed his blood on. The name Hur means to be free, and Hur lived up to this name. He freed himself from the fire and from the flames of Jahannam before it was too late. And the events in Karbala teach us many different lessons, but Hur taught us a very important lesson which we can link to the lecture I just mentioned. He set an example for us. We should think of Hur all the time in our life, not just in the first 10 days of Muharram. Because Hur had a choice between Jannah and between Jahannam, between heaven and between hell. He had the choice to become famous and to have glory in this dunya, in this world, or to have happiness in the Akhirah when he went to meet his Lord. It is never too late for us to ask for repentance. It is never too late for us to ask for forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The lesson to take is that we should be like Hur. We should choose good. We should choose righteousness. We should choose justice and truth. On the 9th of Muharram, Hur began to hear the children from Imam Hussein's camp crying, Al-Atash, Al-Atash, the thirst, the thirst. The children in Imam al-Hussein's camp were crying out for water, were crying out due to thirst. Their throats became like sandpaper. They could not even swallow their own saliva. This is not just any children, this is the children of Abu Abdullah. Hur begins to hear these children crying, and he becomes very restless. He keeps thinking that he has made a grave mistake by forcing Imam Hussein alayhi salam to come to Karbala. He questions himself, what have I done? Why did I put the son of Fatima in this position? Will Hussein forgive me? Will Allah forgive me? Will Fatima forgive me? How can I ask for forgiveness after what I have done? Hur couldn't sleep that entire night on the night of the 9th of Muharram. He began to weep and he began asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive him. And he couldn't take it anymore, so he called his son. And he says, my son, I have made a terrible mistake. I have brought a pious and truthful man onto this land to be killed. Please, my son, take me to Al-Hussein quickly. I want to beg him to forgive me before it is too late, for I am ashamed of myself. But will Hussein face me? Will Hussein forgive me? How can I face him? Hur continues, my son, before you take me to Imam Hussein, tie my hands and cover my face so that I do not have to face Abu Abdullah whilst I ask him for his forgiveness. Abbas, who is guarding the tents of the children, saw these two men coming towards him. He thought that they were coming to attack him and attack the children, so he pulls out his sword and he warns them, stop where you are. Imam Hussein alayhi salam also sees these two men coming, and he says, Abbas, my brother, put away your sword. These men are not coming to attack us. This is Hur, this is my special guest, and I have been waiting for him. Understand this, Imam Hussein alayhi salam was waiting for this moment to happen. Hussein and Abbas go to greet him. Salam Hur, salam, I have been waiting for you, Imam Hussein says. Hur throws himself at the feet of Imam Hussein and he says, Mawla, my master, please forgive me. I am extremely sorry for what I have done. I am ashamed of myself for the actions which I have done. Imam Hussein takes Hur into his arms and he says, Hur, my friend, I forgive you. I assure you that my grandfather Rasulullah, my father Amir al-Mu'mineen, and my mother Sayyidah Fatima have also forgiven you. Soon after this, Yazid's soldiers blow the trumpet and they start the battle against Imam Hussein. Hur asks the Imam for permission to go and fight into the battlefield. The Imam refuses. He says, Hur, you are my guest. You have only been with me for a very short time and I have not been able to look after you properly. The Imam's children and the Imam are dying of thirst and he asks for forgiveness for not being able to take good care of Hur. He says, I have neither fed you and I have not been able to give you water because I have none. All I can ask for is that you spend just a little bit more time with me. Imam Hussein says, I cannot let you die, Hur. You are my guest. But Hur does not give up. He begins to say to the Imam, he begins to beg with the Imam, let me be the first one who goes into the battlefield. I am the one who brought you to Karbala, so let me be the first martyr for your sake. Imam Hussein realizes that the longer Hur stays with him, the more Hur is going to suffer with thirst and with hunger. So he gives permission to him. Go Hur, go, fi amanillah. Imam Hussein puts Hur onto the horse and sends him into the battle. Hur was a very brave and very strong man. He fought the army of Yazid bravely, and he sent many of the accursed Yazid soldiers to Jahannam. Eventually, Hur is struck and he falls off of his horse. He is severely wounded. He is at the point of death. And who does he call for? He says, Ya Hussein, Mawla, come quickly to me. Let me see you for one last time whilst I'm on this earth. Hur begins to take his last breaths. And Imam Hussein alayhi salam puts Hur's head into his lap. He says again, Fi amanillah, Hur, go. My grandfather Rasulullah is waiting for you. My father Amir al-Mu'mineen is waiting for you. My mother Sayyidah Fatima is waiting for you. And inshaAllah, soon we will be joining you in Jannah. Imam Hussein alayhi salam, with tears falling out of his eyes, prays to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, Ya Allah, please forgive Hur and grant him a place in Jannah. Grant him a place in heaven. And with this dua, Hur died on Imam Hussein's lap. And Abbas and Ali al-Akbar helped Imam Hussein carry Hur's body to the tent for his last moments on this earth. Hur is the example that it is never too late for us to go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and ask for forgiveness. Hur is the example that even those who may side with evil during their lifetime have the chance to switch this and to do right and to honor Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by following His laws. And to finish, I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant victory to the mu'mineen and the mazlumeen and the mujahideen. And for all of the shuhada, please recite Surah Al-Fatiha after salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.